Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining me today at this Shift Happens webinar. My name is Timothy Botcher, and I'm the CRO of AvePoint, which is AvePoint's e-learning subsidiary and a suite of e-learning tools that are part of our overall confidence platform. Today, we're going to be talking about a crash course in the e-learning landscape, and in particular, looking at Viva Learning, what it is, how it works, where it fits, and then we'll spend a few minutes right at the end exploring some AvePoint solutions, part of our MavenPoint suite, that help you take your Viva Learning initiatives to the next level as well. So a question I get asked all the time, if I have an LMS already, why do I need Viva Learning? Or what's the difference between Microsoft Learn and Viva Learning? And you can see a bunch of different terms flying up on the screen behind me here, from LMS to LXP, XAPI, SCORM, and so on. And look, if you can already clearly and easily articulate the differences between Microsoft Learn and Viva Learning and an LMS, then you're probably a little bit more advanced in this crash course, and you can come back about halfway through and learn a bit more about Viva Learning itself. But for everyone else, this session is to help you understand that the e-learning landscape is quite broad. It's easy to take it at face value and lump all the different learning tools together in the same bucket. But for those of us who are not from a learning and development background, perhaps we're from an IT background or other kind of background, what I'm trying to illustrate here is that e-learning is its own space. Now, we don't have to be experts in this space today, and I'm certainly not going to cover every single one of the terms that you see up here. But what's worth appreciating is the breadth and the depth of the e-learning space when approaching conversations with your team, because there's usually not a straightforward answer, and you're going to get a lot of it depends, depending on what your outcome you're trying to achieve and the different tools you have at hand. So with that background, the goal of today's session is a better understanding of the e-learning landscape, and then an understanding of Viva Learning. What is it? Where does it fit? How do I get the most use out of it? And then we'll talk about some of my tips and tricks for taking Viva Learning to the next level, as well as discussing some of the ways that AvePoint solutions can help you elevate Viva Learning from just an online learning platform into a live, interactive, and peer learning tool as well. Crash course oversimplification of the e-learning landscape. We'll start with one everybody knows, the LMS, the Learning Management System. Now let's talk a little bit about what are the defining characteristics of a learning management system. Typically, it's about creating courses that you then push out to your audience, in this case, your staff or your learners, where you assign different courses to them, you curate the course content, and then you've got assignments, tracking, and being able to watch people finish their completions in the course. It's a top-down approach to learning, and this is the traditional learning management system. A good example might be some anti-bias training or some other kinds of mandatory training that you create, you curate, you push out to your staff, and then you watch their completions and you track their completions as well. Slightly different approach to what we call in the industry an LXP, a learning experience platform. And this is more of your bottom-up approach rather than a top-down. So defining characteristics are that it's self-led, it's driven by user discovery, and it can be based on skills and badges and choose your own adventure kind of journeys. A good example is, I'm a staff, I wish I was better at using Microsoft Excel or Microsoft PowerPoint. Where do I go to find a video and help upskill myself and learn for myself? It's not necessarily pushed down to me. It's not necessarily a corporate curated course that's pushed to me. It's rather I'm finding my own learning journey to find information and skills for myself. And finally, another kind of common learning tool that you will experience is an online learning platform, otherwise known as a content provider. It's not specifically an LMS or an LXP, but typically it's a large library of videos of content like LinkedIn Learning or Pluralsight or Coursera On Demand. It's one of those large content provider libraries where you can browse and access a number of pre-recorded learning material. Unfortunately, this is an oversimplification. In the real world, it still does get messy. Okay, to that end, it's not a silver bullet description. Sometimes the answer is easy and clear. You can look at a system and peg it as an LMS or peg it as an LXP, but oftentimes you'll get a lot of, it depends, right? A lot of modern or next-gen platforms have a little bit of everything, right? It might be at its core an LMS, but it has some LXP and discovery features, or it might be an online content provider providing videos and streaming training courses, but it does have abilities to set and track assignments as well. So another analogy to help drive home this example might be, why do I need Microsoft Publisher if I have Microsoft Word, right? Is your answer to that might be, well, Yeah, you can kind of do the same thing with both, I guess, right? You can publish a document with Word and also publish a brochure, and you can kind of do the same thing with Publisher, but they're two different tools with different nuances. And the takeaway from this is when you're evaluating e-learning tools, what I recommend is look at the needs of your organization and the functionality of the tool and work with your people and your L&D teams to understand what are the specific learning styles that we're trying to go for? What are the specific outcomes that we're trying to achieve? And this will help you evaluate the different tools in the landscape and help find a fit that's going to meet the needs of your organization. So now that we have that background, let's talk a little bit more about Viva Learning. What is it? So let's check out some of the things that Viva Learning can do. Right? So one of the major advantages of Viva Learning is that you can access it right from Teams. Right? So it's an app in Teams, you open it up and it acts as a content aggregator. So a lot of online learning content platforms like LinkedIn Learning primarily, Microsoft Learn is another content provider of Microsoft learning material. It's different to the LinkedIn Learning Library that's full of all sorts of learning material. Skillsoft, Pluralsight, Coursera, edX, Cornerstone On Demand, Saba, SAP SuccessFactors. There's a lot out there. Even curricula, LMSs, and your own content in SharePoint. Viva Learning acts like a content aggregator for your learning content. It is the place to go for your employees to find learning information. Another thing that Viva Learning makes easy is sharing learning content. So we know it's an aggregator, it can pull a lot of content in, but rather than other systems, which typically you have to leave Teams and go and find a piece of learning content like a video or a resource and copy the URL and then share it back to your colleagues in Teams, Viva Learning makes it super easy. So right within Viva Learning, you can click on, like if you're in a chat or in a team or somewhere else, you can click on the Viva Learning button, select the learning resource that you're looking to share, and it makes it super easy to share a piece of learning content with a colleague or a team. So another thing you can do with Viva Learning is what's called social learning. And this is a thing we're a big fan of at AvePoint and MavenPoint. But essentially with traditional online learning, you're sitting down by yourself as an individual to watch a video or consume some material. And it's a very individual experience. But with social learning, you can actually interact with your peers, with fellow learners, share content, discuss ideas, and generally have a more social experience that's more engaging and with better learning outcomes. And this is something you can do with Viva Learning as well by taking an existing team like a project team or a departmental team and adding a tab to that team, a Viva Learning tab. You can then select and search and share learning resources from Viva Learning in that tab in Teams. So now you've gone from an individual learning experience to a more social learning experience. Okay, so now it's time for a bit of an audience question. Now that you've heard a little bit about what Viva Learning can do, how would you categorize it? What sort of learning tool do you think it fits under? Knowing that we've got some aggregated content, self-led discovery, it's a little bit more user-driven, a bit more bottom-up, you might say. Comes with a recommendations engine to recommend learning content. Ticks a lot of boxes for an LXP. So if you said LXP, I think I'd agree with you on this. Now, I don't think there's any official documentation from Microsoft calling Viva Learning an LXP. I think officially the term they use is a learning hub in Teams. However, if you do look around on the internet, you will see things like an old LinkedIn Learning article where they quote replace their old SharePoint LXP with Viva Learning. So, if the shoe fits, I think it's like we said, there's no silver bullet description for all these different kinds of tools, but it fits a lot of the description for what an LXP is. So let's go into a little bit more detail about what it is and what it isn't. We know that it's an app in Teams. It's available in Teams. You don't have to leave Teams to go to another learning resource. You don't have to leave to go and access other material elsewhere. It is an easy way to access learning material right in Teams, making Teams truly the hub for all teamwork in your organization. It's an aggregation and discovery of e-learning content throughout your org. So within your organization, you might have different kinds of learning sources. This will pull them all together into one spot, making it easy for your learners and your users to find learning content. It helps you enable social learning, something that you don't necessarily get with other learning platforms easily. And it does come with a number of other different features, such as assignments and tracking and reminders that are part of the premium license. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But what it isn't, it's not an LMS, right? You're not creating courses from scratch with a custom material, custom content, not easily anyway. And you're not assigning them and sending them out in mass and tracking completions easily. Okay, so again, there's some little features where you can do some light assignments and some light tracking, but it's definitely not an LMS. Another thing is it's not contextual learning. And what I mean by that, and this is a little bit controversial, a lot of the marketing material about Viva Learning and for a lot of learning platforms is learning in the flow of work. And what they're trying to get at by that marketing slogan is trying to say you don't have to stop what you're doing, stop work, stop everything, minimize teams, go into another system to access your learning content. What they're trying to say by learning in the flow of work is that you're in teams, you're chatting, you're working, you're accessing your tab with Viva Learning material, and now within the flow of my day of work, I'm accessing learning material. And the reason why that definition is a little bit controversial is because classically learning in the flow of work is more contextual learning. And what I mean by that is rather than just having learning material in the destination where you are, it's more like you're in the middle of writing a letter and Clippy pops up and says, "Hey, it looks like you're writing a letter. Can I help you with that? Here's a video about how that works." Or maybe you're in PowerPoint and you don't know how to animate a slide, and it understands that you're struggling to animate a slide, and it pops up contextually saying, "Hey, how'd you like to animate this slide? Watch this video to find out how." That's called contextual learning. And you can argue about where the definition of in the flow of work sits. However, just be aware that when people say Viva Learning is in the flow of work, what they mean is it's integrated into your learning or your working experiences, but it's not specifically contextual to what you're doing at any given time. Another thing is it doesn't provide any automation or scheduling to incorporate live training. Okay, so if you've got a mix of on-demand content, some videos, some course materials that you want to share with your team in Viva Learning, that's great. But if you want to start doing things like scheduling a live training series, office hours, management training, or a periodic onboarding cohorts, that's not what Viva Learning is designed to do. It is designed to be more of that on-demand, user-driven access content. So now that we know a little bit more about Viva Learning and what it is and what it does, let's talk a little bit about where it fits inside your organizational landscape. Okay, so just like Teams is the hub for teamwork, Viva Learning is the hub for learning. So again, it's an app in Teams. It lives inside Teams. So when you access it on your phone or anywhere else, you're accessing it via your Teams app and then opening Viva Learning. And again, it's aggregating all different kinds of learning content in. So Microsoft Learn, this is an online learning platform just with Microsoft content, right? How to use M365, how to use other kinds of Microsoft tools. Then you've also got LinkedIn Learning, again, online learning, much broader series of content. It will bring that into Viva Learning. You can search, you can discover it. You can also bring in your own learning repositories, such as SharePoint or other kinds of information from your intranet. You put them in a special SharePoint spot, they'll appear in Viva Learning, and that's an easy way for you to get some of your existing learning content appearing in Viva Learning. And of course, taking it to the next level, you can connect your third-party LMS. So if you've got an LMS in your organization already, and it's Viva aware, then all of the courses that you've published in your LMS can also then be exposed on Viva Learning as well. Again, you're trying to bring that in to be the hub for learning. That's where Viva Learning slots into Teams as part of the overall employee experience as well. So if you think about what Microsoft is doing with the Viva Suite, it's all about efficiency, goals, work-life balance, connections, growth, purpose, insights. And this is where the wider employee experience suite comes into play with things like Viva Connections, which brings in all your portals and your news and your search and your publishing material, or Viva Engage, which is a way to take your communications and engagement just from within your teams or local projects and across your whole organization in a much broader sense. So this is where Viva Learning is one aspect of the overall employee experience that Microsoft is driving with Teams. Similarly, just last week as well, they announced skills in Viva. And this isn't just in Viva Learning. This is a wider feature or facet of the Viva suite where they're pulling skills in across all the different tools, recognizing that things like skills are not just in learning, but leveraging the power of Microsoft Graph and providing employee activity signals across Microsoft 365 apps and services, pulling in information from the LinkedIn skills graph, which is a dynamic model that maps all the global skills landscape and how there's 39,000 unique skills that relate to each other and brings them into learning content. as well. So it can pick up on what you're doing across portals, what you're searching for in Engage, how you're interacting with your colleagues, what your title, what your department is, what your role is. And now Viva Learning can work with that wider M365 employee experience ecosystem to intelligently suggest you new learning content based on skills that employees are currently developing or maybe interested in learning. It gives you a new set of dashboards as well in things like Viva Insights, which allows leaders to visualize skill metrics, perhaps organization capabilities and gaps, and opportunities to be able to use things like Viva Learning to assign specific training that's skills-based outcomes to their organization or their team. So definitely slots in on the bigger picture. It's not just a standalone tool for learning content, aggregates content, learning hub, and fits in with the wider employee experience across connections, communications, insights to be an overall holistic learning tool. All right, that was probably a lot, especially if you're new to that space. But let's take a moment now to talk about some of the aspects of Viva Learning that I really like, some tips and tricks that I personally use to make the most of Viva Learning. And to kick things off, I've got another question for everybody. What do you think is the number one reason that employees feel held back from learning at work? Okay, did you guess what it is? So if you said time, do I have the time available to learn at work? You'd be correct. And I think this particular screenshot is from a LinkedIn Learning study, but you can look up virtually any study on workplace learning. And as an individual, the number one reason that people often have for saying that they feel held back learning at work is that they just simply don't have or can't find the time. Okay, so this is where this add to calendar feature of Viva Learning seems really simple, but I actually think it's a very valuable way to get the most out of Viva Learning. So you're browsing Viva Learning, you found a course that you really like, or it looks interesting, or someone's recommended to you. One of the things you can do is there is a button right on Viva Learning called Add to Calendar. Again, trying to take away the barriers, take away the friction. You don't have to go into your calendar and block off time to remember to do it. No, you can hit the Add to Calendar button, set some time, set some date, and type in a little bit of information, remind it to yourself, and then this will successfully automatically add it to your calendar. Again, it's all about making it easy to allocate time to learning for you as a learner. Another overlooked feature of Viva Learning that a lot of people don't do is setting your interests. So I mentioned Viva Learning has a great recommendations engine. It'll look at you and your role, things that you're interacting with, and make recommendations to you. But the easiest way is to help the system help you, right? So if you set your interests in Viva Learning, a number of different topics or learning areas that are interested to you and your role, then it will help make that recommendations engine smarter and more relevant for you when you're looking for learning material. Again, another feature of removing friction to learning, making it easier for you to learn at work, is the ability to assign learning material to users. So this is more applicable if you're in a team scenario or perhaps a manager scenario. I mean, obviously, if one of your friends at work didn't do a great job at public speaking, you might not appreciate that you're linking him a video about public speaking. But essentially, this is a great way that you can assign learning to your learners. So if you're in a team or a management scenario, you might have discussed with your team a particular topic about leadership or some other skill that they should do. What you can do is then assign that to your team and then see and track their completions on it. A little bit basic, you can see if they've not started it or if it's in progress or completed, but it's there. And if it's there to use, you should use it. Another great feature that we mentioned before is adding Viva Learning to a Teams tab. So I mentioned this briefly in the social learning section, but to go into a little bit more detail on it. So imagine you've got a project team or a department team, and as part of your weekly stand-up meetings, you've identified an area that you want to work on or that you want to learn more about, maybe agile Scrum development or using Power Apps for citizen development. Very, very easy to take an existing team, add a Viva Learning tab to it, and it allows you and your colleagues to share and add and search different kinds of learning information to that tab. So again, taking that away from an individual experience and turning it into a social learning experience. I really like this feature of Viva Learning. With that said, there's always a catch. There's still a few things that you need to be aware of before you dive feet first into the Viva Learning experience. A lot of the cool things that I showed you just then do require Viva Learning Premium. Okay, so the things like the add to calendar, learning path assignments, linked content. So if you want to be able to link content from YouTube or another site, or even another site within SharePoint, right? You can discover this content in Viva Learning. You can't consume it in Viva Learning. Microsoft takes all the cool bits and puts them behind the premium license. So keep that in mind. If you've got the full Viva suite, great. You automatically get access to Viva Learning Premium. But if you don't have access to the full Viva Learning suite, then it's worth looking at which features and aspects are valuable to you. Similarly, adding your own content from SharePoint. One of the things I get asked all the time is, how can I take my own content and put it in Viva Learning? You can do that with a SharePoint connector. However, one of the restrictions is that it only works for one site. So you won't have one team site, only put in video and Office documents, and cross-linking to other sites and other locations and pulling in other areas. That's a premium feature. Okay, and finally, the assignments, the reporting and the tracking that I mentioned before, you saw a little bit of an example of that. It's there, but it's rudimentary because it's meant to be rudimentary. The goal is not to be an LMS, right? Again, play to the strengths of the tool. I've talked about some of the great things Viva Learning can do. Obviously, there's a lot of great things behind the premium license as well, but at the end of the day, it's not an LMS. And that is why you still need an LMS. Right? So to take Viva Learning to the next level, Viva Learning alone is great, but again, it's very user-driven, bottom-up, self-led discovery. By pairing it with an LMS, it gives you that advantage of the top-down, the pushed-out, the mandatory courses, the full detailed assignments and tracking and compliance and auditing features. So all the kind of cool stuff you'd want. It's still good to have an LMS, and by LMS, I mean a modern LMS, right? One that is Teams aware and Viva Learning aware and works well with the ecosystem, and it's not just shoehorned in. Okay, so this is where AvePoint helps with our curricular solution, part of the MavenPoint suite of products. So what you're seeing here is our online SaaS LMS, fully single sign-on SSO with your Microsoft ID. It is a fully fledged LMS that can stand alone if you wish. It's designed for learners, for a good learning experience. And what you're seeing here is the homepage with calendar and tasks. You've got discovery, you search, recommend as well. Again, this integrates with Viva Learning, as you'll see in a second too. It also integrates with Go1 and LinkedIn Learning. And this allows your L&D and your people team to create and manage courses and course content using custom course content from SharePoint or your own, and be able to deliver it to learners in an LMS style experience. But you also get the added feature of being able to integrate it with Viva Learning and get all the cool Viva Learning features as well. So one of the things that we do differently as well is that instead of adding a learning tab to an existing team like Viva Learning does, we also give you the ability, because we're a Teams aware LMS, we can take it the other way around, and you can add a Teams class to your learning path. So as an L&D or as someone who's creating learning content, you might have a mandatory course, something like anti-bias training. That's more of an individual course that I'll take by myself. But you might have something like leadership training, where you've got all of your managers and leaders working together and collaborating on the same learning material, attending the same sessions. Then you can simply click this button and add a team to it, and it will create and manage the team automatically. You don't have to go and add people to the course and then add people to the team. It will take it from the team, from the classroom perspective, where you can start with your learning path, and as you add users to it, it'll automatically add them to the team and automatically add the tab to teams as well. So let me show you an example of what that looks like. Right, so let's start from Teams, and we'll show you how this all ties together with Viva Learning. So starting from Teams, let's access Viva Learning. So I'm going to click on it on the left rail there. And from the Viva Learning homepage, because this is pulling in all content across my organization, including our curricular solution, I can actually scroll down to my integrated curricular content from my LMS and choose the internal leadership training course. Now, this is a course that's being created by our AvePoint L&D team, and it's a mixture of live sessions and on-demand content. So we have a meeting series and a schedule of meetings, and it's also got on-demand content that you can learn about as well, right? So I can access this content, and Curricula will then show me the sessions and the topics. I can see there's different classes and different timing for the APAC managers versus the North America or the EMEA managers. I can choose the cohort that I want and then click Join Class. Now, the first thing that happens is, because this is a blended course, and what we mean by blended is it has a mix of live training and on-demand content, but because it's blended, the first thing that happens is I'll receive the meeting invite series automatically. Okay, so in my inbox, I'll get session 1, session 2, session 3 automatically from the local trainer that's assigned. So this will be a different series of meeting invites for the different time zones or different locations. But again, curricula manages the structure and the schedule. L&D team can assign the people and all the content and what the layout is, and curricula will take care of automating the rest, automating the scheduling, and also automating adding people to teams. Because at the same time, I get a pop-up saying, hey, you've now been joined to the Management 101 team. All right, so to learn about leadership at AvePoint. So from here, you can see I'm added to a team with my fellow learners. I can I can emote, I can interact with them. This is true social learning, right? Like kind of like the Viva Learning example we were describing before. But what's more is the tabs have automatically been added to the team. So I can click on the channel, I can go up to learning activities, and the cohort of learners can now access the content from my LMS at any time. And this is full LMS functionality now. So this is surfacing curricula into Teams. So completion, paths, badges, reporting, attendance, all of it is available. And any kind of content too. You can see here we've got a mix of video and other reference material, but the main action is an interactive playbook that our L&D team made. I think they might have made it in Articulate Rise, but either way, they exported it to SCORM, uploaded it to curricula, and then they're able to use these SCORM learning objects inside curricula that, again, we discovered via Viva Learning, we joined, and now we're automatically added to a team that's automatically been set up, where we've got our meeting series for our live meetings, and now we're able to access the on-demand playbook while interacting, sharing, and engaging with the other learners as well. True social learning. So let's switch gears just a little bit and talk about something a bit different and explore another aspect of the curricular solution, is that it's integrated into AvePoint's cloud governance and MyHub tools to enforce training as part of your governance policy too. So take, for example, you might have a policy that says we don't want users creating teams until they've taken the team's owner training to understand the responsibilities that come with it. So from Teams, you can access MyHub, which would have been set up with all the different policies and procedures in your organization via cloud governance. And we can start a new request to say, okay, well, we want to request a new team site. So we'll scroll through our services and look for the provisioning service, and we go to access it. And the first thing it does is validates our curricular instance to see, have you completed the required team site training? And you can see here, it says we have a corporate policy that says before you can submit this service, we'd like you to make sure you've done the required training so you can't proceed without completing it. So from here, you can click on the link, launch the training in Teams. Again, that part of flow of work, try and not leave Teams to get our work done and make sure that we're staying in the hub for teamwork. And where I can now access my learning content. So here we've got just some example content to show you what that could be, but this could be anything, your secure documents policy, your external sharing policy, your site creation policy. Either way, as you work through whatever tasks are required of you and you submit, now we can go back into MyHub, access the provisioning request again, and now it doesn't stop us. Right, now it lets us proceed with filling in all the required information and submitting that request. And again, this is just one example about how you can take, because we are a Teams aware and a Microsoft and an AvePoint aware learning tool, you can bake training into your existing governance policies or into your other areas, or you can make them discoverable by Viva Learning. And after completing the course, then it adds you to an AD group, or it completes some other kind of action as part of your workflow. This is the kind of stuff that a modern LMS can help you achieve. And finally, one last feature of curricula that I want to highlight for you today. It's not just integrated with Viva Learning. As a Microsoft house, we integrate with all sorts of different parts of the Microsoft platform, including Power BI. So a lot of people ask me about learning reports and how deep can we get with learning reports? Well, curricula does give you reports in the browser out of the box, but to get deep insights into the learning activities of your staff, you can also set up a Power BI database that you can connect to and be able to expose and create your own reports in Power BI. Really powerful feature, which I really like. So if you're wanting to see how users are interacting with Viva Learning and the content that you've published from curricula on Viva Learning, see how long they're spending with it, see what they're doing with it, and really get deep learning insights into your own content that you've published on Viva Learning through curricula, you can connect Power BI to curricula as well and get that detail. All right, in wrapping up, the e-learning landscape is very broad. And today we learned a little bit more about LMSs versus an LXP, social learning, blended learning, on-demand learning. We covered a lot of ground today. Don't underestimate how broad this field is. Not all learning tools are alike, and make sure that you're working with your team to understand what the best fit and best tool and best outcomes are going to be. Learning is important. All right, learning is important for retention. It's important for efficiency, and it's important for your employee experience and a pleasant employee experience. So learning is a key part of that. And embrace social learning. Okay, so uh, when you're learning by yourself, that for some people that's a great way to learn, but for others it's less engaging. So having that social aspect, sharing best practices, sharing anecdotes and examples, and talking about the same material on the same page, it makes the learning more interactive, more engaging, and more effective and sticky. Okay, Viva Learning is one tool in your toolkit. It's an excellent tool. It aggregates content, it brings learning into teams, but it is not an LMS. Okay, it's like an LXP in Teams, and it helps you with the discovery and consolidation. But you can help take learning in teams to the next level by having a modern LMS like Curricula that pairs with it and leveraging those two platforms together so you've got the best of both worlds, the best of the top-down approach and the best of the bottom-up approach with Viva Learning. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I recommend that you work with your L&D teams, with your people teams, with your learning teams to determine which tools are best for your particular scenario. And with that, that wraps up today's presentation on a crash course in Viva Learning and the e-learning landscape and different methods you can do to improve your experience and take it to the next level. Thanks again for your time today. Really appreciate it. And if you've got any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out.